This
App.
conference will
We
now
are
be
going to go
recorded.
ahead and get started. It is 10 o'clock. I'm here with Lorrie Germann to take a deep dive into Category 2, understanding it, internal connections, and I guess take it away, Lorrie.
Thank you, Mandy. Good morning, everyone. So yes, as Mandy said, we're talking about Category 2 and also looking at RFPs, requests for proposals. Now, last week we did, pardon me just a second here, get my slides to advance. Last week, it's been a long week. Sorry, I've been training every day. Last week, we talked about Category 2. Now, some of you may not have attended that webinar. So I just want to, just make sure everyone's on the same page when we talk about Category 2 to make sure you understand what we're referring to here. All right, so if you did attend last week, hopefully this is just, again, a refresher, kind of fill in any gaps that you might have experienced last week. So when we talk about Category 2 service, within Category 2, remember there are 3 different service types. And it's really important that whenever you're filing for eRate, you have to indicate, which service type that you're looking for. And sometimes there's some overlap. We see this a lot, like with the access points, the license for the access points, because that license may include some level of maintenance. So that would actually fit under both internal connections and basic maintenance. All right, so again, there is some overlap. When we look at the Form 470, I'll show you how to best file for that to make sure that we're funded. All right, so with Category 2, the 3 service types, the internal connections, and we'll talk about what, exactly what that means, maintenance of the internal connections, and then what we refer to as MIBS, Managed Internal Broadband Service. All right, now remember with the Category 2 service that you are subject to the Category 2 5-year budget requirement. And do not confuse that with Category 1. Category 1 is the bandwidth, your internet access, and there is no budget for that piece, just the Category 2. So when we talk about internal connections, again, just a really quick look here. Internal connections means the hardware to provide the connectivity within the 4 walls of your library space. All right, so we're talking about access points, cabling. It could be, to run new cabling, cable drops. It could be, short patch cables, 2-foot, 3-foot patch cable to put in your wiring closet. All right, that would be eligible. Caching servers. Note that the only server eligible for eRate currently would be a caching server. Firewalls, switches, routers, all right, again, that connectivity hardware, wireless LAN controllers. Now also, a rack to mount the router, the switches, and so on, to mount those would also be eligible, as well as a UPS to power those eligible devices. Now, the software necessary to support the components, again, such as a license for AP would be eligible. And then, if you're looking at some functionality that you can get, virtualized in the cloud, all right, where it's cloud-based, it could be a cloud-based LAN controller, okay, caching service, again, firewall service, as long as it provides the same functionality. If you can get that in the cloud as, purchasing the hardware, that would be eligible as well. Now, when I mentioned MIBS, Managed Internal Broadband Service, this is where you're contracting with a third party to provide the management, all right, of your Wi-Fi. Now, with MIBS, this could be equipment that you already own, or the company, the service provider you go with, they could provide hardware as part of that service. So it's basically part of a lease. All right. So again, you can go either way, or have a combination thereof. Now, when we talk about management, you're going to hear this a lot when we talk about, it has to be an eligible device, eligible service. So when we talk about management of your Wi-Fi, it's management of that eligible equipment, of the router, switches, access points, caching servers, so on. All right, because if the service provider, if they're also providing management, say, of your end user devices, a general file server, then that type work would be considered ineligible, and you would have to cost allocate that out. It's very helpful if you ask your service provider, or when you're filing a Form 470, ask that the company separate out the cost. Some companies will give you a lump sum cost, a monthly amount to do all the management, but ask them to split that out. What parts, for the eligible equipment versus the ineligible. Now, if you are getting the managed internal broadband service and there's some upfront charge, because if you're including leased equipment in this, then the service provider, may include an installation cost. All right, so a lot of times it's you'll have a larger upfront cost, first year, and again, that is eligible as well. Now, basic maintenance of internal connections, all right, it's the maintenance of the routers, the switches, access points, the cable drop, so on. Again, it has to be, that equipment that we saw in that internal connections list. So we're talking about the repair and upkeep of the hardware, wire cable maintenance, basic tech support, configuration changes. Now, keep in mind that with the basic maintenance, it is limited, depending on the type maintenance contract that you have, it's limited to actual work performed under the contract. Sometimes you may have a maintenance package or maintenance contract where it will give you up to a certain number of hours at a certain per hourly rate. So you can request initially on your eRate applications the full cost of that, but you would only be reimbursed for the hours that you actually spent. So if you estimated 50 hours, but you only used 20, you're only going to get reimbursed for the 20 hours. All right, so again, just for planning purposes. Now, there is a level of maintenance, a very basic level. In the past, it was I can compare it to Cisco SmartNet Basic. It's a level of maintenance that just covers like bug fixes, firmware updates, bug patches, online help desk. All right, it's a very minimal cost. So in that level of maintenance, because again, it is very basic, then you can request that service, go ahead and pay for the invoice, and then get reimbursed. In this case, you don't have to show that that work actually happened. All right, so I apologize. I've been saying this every day, and I'm trying to remember the back of my head, have I included this piece yet or not? So sorry for the hesitations. Again, with that level, like I said, you can go ahead and get reimbursed up front. When we go to file for the reimbursement piece, though, we do get additional review questions, invoice review questions, because the reviewers want to make sure, which type of maintenance, were you actually using. Now, depending on what you're purchasing, there may be some miscellaneous charges, things such as taxes, surcharges. If you are leasing equipment, if there's a lease fee, again, those are eligible as well. If you're purchasing hardware from an online company, all right, and there's a shipping charge, all right. So when you're asking for quotes for hardware, I would, basically state that you're also, asking to include any shipping fees, showing a fee for that. Now, training is covered, but here it's training for, say, the IT staff in the operation of a specific piece of equipment. All right, it's not to come in and train your full staff. It's very, specific based on that piece of hardware. And then installation and configuration. So, depending on the equipment that you're purchasing, if you're asking for eRate to cover the installation piece, all right, that is fully eligible. But keep in mind that you could also contract with a third party to do the installation piece, because maybe you're purchasing the hardware from an online company, all right, and then contract with a third party to come in and do the installation, the setup configuration of the components. Let me know if you have any questions there. Okay. Yeah, that's something that a lot of times folks won't think about, contracting with a third party. But again, that is eligible. It's just that when you go to file the Form 471, all right, we're getting a little ahead of ourselves in the filing series, but you would basically just file it as a separate funding request. So you would say, here's the funding request for the hardware. Here's the vendor I'm purchasing that from, and then here's a separate FRN for the install piece. Now, again, like I said, we talked about this last week, but just as a refresher, remember with the Category 2 budget, for libraries, it's based on square footage, all right? And each individual library receives their budget. And also as a reminder, you cannot take a portion of one, say one branch's budget and use that money to purchase equipment for another branch, all right? You cannot pool the funds. All right, so for most libraries, the per square footage is $2.39, all right? So that's your budget amount. Now, if you are a larger, larger library system, major metropolitan areas, if you have an IMLS code of 11, 12, or 21, then you do receive a much larger Cat 2 budget amount. All right, it's $5.20 per square foot. Because again, when you look at the number of patrons that you serve, you want to make sure that you have the level of connectivity within the buildings to support all those patrons. Okay, so that's why the difference. Now, if you do have a very small facility, then you do qualify for a minimum budget, and it's currently at $9,582.23. This odd amount is because it's increased about 1 to 2% each year since 2015 for inflation. All right, so that's why the numbers are a little different. Okay. Now, when we talk about minimum budget, this might be something where, say, you have a kiosk and it's maybe in a community center, and you need to buy an access point to put in that facility. All right. So again, something like that would qualify as a minimum budget. All right, just a quick example here. So let's say you have a library that has square footage, let's say 10,000 square feet, $2.39 per square foot comes out to $23,900. All right, so just simple math here. But this is what we call a pre-discount amount, because remember with eRate, for libraries, it depends on which school system that the main library serves. All right, so whatever that school district's discount rate is, then all the library facilities within your system would receive the same discount percentage. Okay, so depending on that percentage, if you purchase, say for this library site, just shy of $24,000 in hardware, then you would receive back whatever your discount rate is. All right, so if you're at an 80%, you would get back 80% of that cost. All right, now what we need to do, because Category 2 funding started back in the 2015 funding year, so you would want to go back and look at those previous years. Did you, request and get funded in a previous year? Because then you would just deduct that, because remember, this is a 5-year budget with the funding beginning in 2015. All right, so again, just go back, look at what did we use previously. So in my example in 2015 and then again in 2016, this example, that library requested $5,000 each year, right, for those 2 years. So they've spent $10,000 so far, leaving $13,900. Now, again, I mentioned this last week. Right now, we're not sure what's happening with Category 2. We're waiting on the FCC to make some decisions. The funding started, as I said, in 2015. The intent to be a 5-year period. All right. There's also language in the modernization order that revamped the program that said that the first year that you applied and were funded for Category 2, that would start your 5-year rotation. All right. So if you didn't apply until 2017, will you get the benefit of the full 5 years? And at this point, we don't know that. all right, because we're waiting on the FCC to come back, because they basically set aside $1 billion per year for the first 5 years to try Category 2. Let's try it. Let's see how this goes. All right. So again, if you started in, something after 2015, we're not sure if we're going to get the benefit of the full 5 years. And this is something that I'm stressing with the schools as well. Hopefully, I'm hoping we're going to know something here soon, during this filing season, so that we can make a better informed decision. Are they going to continue it? Will we get the benefit of those additional years? Hopefully, we're going to get a decision during this filing season. All right. But what I'm recommending to everyone is basically have dual plans. All right. If Category 2 were to end with the 2019 funding year, so that you basically would want to push to spend all of that funding for this year, what would you purchase? Kind of the sky's the limit, looking at what you have left. And then have a secondary plan that if the FCC were to continue this, would you do a more, phased approach for upgrades? Hopefully that makes sense to everyone, okay? But again, have the dual plan, because you can actually file, multiple Form 470s asking for the, like I said, the absolute max of whatever funding you have left. Ask for a scaled down approach. You could actually even put it on a Form 471. Here's the max we're looking for. But then when you go to ask for reimbursement, you don't have to purchase everything you put on that 470, 471. All right. Now, again, I shared this last week, the Category 2 budget tool. Should I pull up the website? I can show it again. Is that all right? Bear with me a second. Did I go too far? I apologize. I should have had this pulled up beforehand. All right. So to get to this budget tool, there's actually 2 tools available. One is in the EPC portal, but I don't recommend using that one because remember, the EPC portal didn't begin until 2016. Category 2 funding began in 15. The way the portal was programmed, it cannot see any eRate activity prior to 2016. All right, so if you go in and look at the tool in the portal, and you also ask for funding in 15, all right, none of that's going to show. So we do have a tool out here that's going to show our full usage, the allocation. So if I go over, and this is just the usac.org/SL site, under Resources and Tools, click on Tools. All right, and then we're going to scroll down until we get to the 471 section. All right, we'll see the 471 tools, first thing in the list, Category 2 budget tool. Now, remember, if you have multiple library sites, each of those sites receive a Category 2 budget. So here we have to enter the entity numbers of each of those sites. You cannot just put in your build entity number, that overarching number. So you could pull up the numbers in the portal and copy and paste them over, manually enter them, of course, separated by a comma. But USAC did add the ability to search. So if I click on the magnifying glass, and the default comes up already checked for libraries. Now you can do a name search and then also indicate which state. I tried this the other day because I live in Chillicothe, found out there's lots of Chillicothe's around the country. So, all right, you could also put in your zip code. Now, remember, if you're putting in a zip code, you would want to extend this out and look all the zip codes wherever your branches are located. But as I said, I live in Chillicothe, so I'll put in that zip code and I click on search. All right, and then it's going to show me, let me scroll down here, all right, the various branch locations. So I could come up here and click indicate all, or I can say, no, I just want to look at my main library, the Huntington branch. Now remember, here we're seeing the maintenance building. All right, with this tool, it comes back with the search option. It says, okay, here are all the entity numbers that we have under the zip code with the designation of library, all right? But the maintenance building, remember what we call non-instructional facilities, those locations do not qualify for Category 2 funding, all right? So if I check the box there, it's just going to give me a red error message saying, can't calculate a budget for this site, just so you know what that means there. All right, so let's just look at those. All right, so again, check the boxes, and I click on OK. And it's just going to copy those entity numbers over for me. All right, a little bit of a time saver. And then I can click on Look Up C2 Budget Status. Now, when I do that, it's going to say, okay, here are the entity numbers and the site names. I can then just come over and click on the plus sign. Now, it's also showing me that this is the information as of 2018. All right, so I can just continue clicking down, and then that's going to show me for these sites, this is how much money's remaining. Now, if you put in one of your sites and it comes back saying that it cannot calculate a budget for that site, then you would need to go into the EPC portal, verify that you've entered square footage for those sites. All right, because that's obviously that's what's used to calculate the budget. When we go into the portal, all right, the square footage is not a required field. All right, because that doesn't affect your Category 1, your bandwidth at all. Those funding decisions. So again, if you pull up a branch and you get an error message, go in and verify or update the square footage for that site. All right, so that's going to tell me for each location how much money is still out there. So looking at the main library, based on the square footage there and its locale code. All right, so we have 56,733. They've only used 5,000, just a little over 5,000 of that. Here's the remaining portion. Now, also, it's how do I know for sure when did we apply for the first time? Now, when we talk about, when did you start utilizing Category 2 money? Let's say you have 5 different branches, but you asked for just one switch for one of the locations. All right, if you're a library system, then that started your basically 5-year rotation. It didn't matter which site you asked for the equipment for, all right, or the cost, any request at all, for any location within the branch or within the system, excuse me, that starts your rotation. All right, now if I click here and I choose 2015, I'm going to get this message, budget cannot be calculated for this funding year. That means that there were no requests at all for 2015. If I if I choose 16, all right, then I see it was in 16 that they did request hardware for the main library, all right, and then also for the Mount Logan. Okay, so that tells me then that 2016 was their first year utilizing their Category 2. So if the FCC makes the decision to continue this program in its current form, then they would be able to request funding during the 2020 funding year. All right, questions on that?
The C2 budget, that number increases even though you started your 5 years at a lower number.
Yes, yes. So when we look at this for the folks online, remember in the first year of C2 funding, the per square foot allocation was $2.30. All right. So then each year it's gone up about 1 to 2%. So now it's $2.39. All right. So that's why that dollar amount has eked up a little bit. So if I look here, and again, there was nothing in 15. All right, but excuse me, let me go over here to 16. So if I come here to 16, we see the budget was 55.15. Let's come to 18, and you'll see how it went up. Do you notice that? So it went from 55,000 to 56,000. Question?
Question on chat. If you've never used category 2, do I need to calculate my amount myself?
If you could use this tool and you have, plugged in the square footage for each of your locations, this tool will calculate it for you. Okay. Or again, if you've not used it at all, it's easy enough. If you know that, okay, for this branch location, we have 10,000 square feet, so it's $2.39 or the 520, depending on your locale code. Okay. Let me know if that answered it completely.
Yeah, it's I think she's from the Rodman Library and Alliance. I wanted to look it up.
Okay, I can look that up.
She says thank you.
You're welcome. You give me just a second here. Do you mind my looking it up here? Is that okay? All right, there we go. All right, so then we have the one branch. Your bookmobile also gets a category 2 budget. Typically it's going to be that minimum budget. I know we had the discussion last week. But what category 2 equipment would you buy for a bookmobile? Because we do ask for the hotspots to provide the Wi-Fi for those facilities, but that qualifies under category 1. All right, but again, they still get a category 2 budget. All right, so there's the main, and then the kiosk. Like I said, it would also qualify for the minimum budget. Now, often we don't put a square footage in for a kiosk, so it may not calculate. When I click on OK, status. All right, so it's showing us then for the Rodman branch, library branch. All right, thanks, Karen. It looks like you are getting the minimum budget then. All right, for that branch, you might want to just verify the square footage there, and then for your main location, all right, just shy of $100,000. Now, when we look at this budget, when it shows remaining, again, remember this is your pre-discount budget. So then, if you purchase $9,500 in hardware, you would then get reimbursed for whatever your discount rate is. And it's been interesting this is my 3rd week doing training, been traveling the state, and it's interesting, quite an eye opener when we pull this up, and you see that number and you realize how much that you do have available. All right, but let me know if you have other questions. Yes.
Question from chat. When would the approved discount, when would the approved pre-discount be 0? Like it is here.
Oh, good question. All that means is that you've not asked for any category 2 funding. All right. So either they've not applied, which I think Karen indicated, they've not applied, or if you applied and it was denied for some reason. Okay. This is only going to show when you were actually approved, when you received a funding letter. So if there's a 0 there, it would be one of those 2 cases. Okay. All right, but again, I'll leave this open and we can come back to it if we get more questions. All right. One other point here, if you did apply for category 2 between 2015 up through our current funding year, 2018, if you applied and then realized that you didn't fully utilize what you requested, maybe you asked for 20 access points and then realized at the time you were purchasing that you only needed 10. All right, so you've requested more funding than you really needed. With category 2, we have to let USAC know that you didn't fully use that money. Because even if you filed the forms for reimbursement, all right, and so you only ask for half of that back, USAC is not going to automatically just put the money back into the budget for you. We have to file what's called a Form 500 to either indicate that I want to reduce my funding request, So to reduce it simply means that you didn't purchase the full quantity that you've requested. Or it's the case, someone mentioned in my training yesterday that they had asked for, to put in all new cabling drops in their buildings, and it was fairly large, but then they decided that, no, we're not going to do this at all this year. So the question, okay, what do we do? So then you can file a Form 500 and just say, I want to totally cancel that funding request. All right, but then that basically, it just notifies USAC, they put the money back into your budget. All right, but if you don't file the form, okay, you could lose the funding. Now the Form 500, we do file this in the EPC portal. So if you do need to file that, let me know and I'll be glad to help you. All right, maximizing your Category 2 funding. Now here we're really getting into some technical weeds here. Question.
By when does the Form 500 need to be filed?
It's interesting with this form, for returning funds, putting it back into your budget, for that type filing, there is no fixed deadline. You could actually file one now, saying back to 2015. I discovered, didn't use it, put it back. Yeah, they've been very, very flexible there. All right, so when we're looking at, how do you determine your needs? Because I know some library systems, that they have IT folks on staff that can help with this, others do not. All right, so, some of the best practices, recommendations, looking at, does your library have robust Wi-Fi? When you look at the number of patrons that you serve, devices that you provide on site, patrons bringing their, their devices in, do you have adequate Wi-Fi? All right, so, start looking at access points. How many are needed in the common areas? All right, well, remember also with Category 2, within that library, there's also the offices. All right, so those areas would qualify for the Category 2 if you're using, anything within those 4 walls. What 802.11, okay, what standard are you using? All right, so right now, the recommendation that would provide enough throughput, at a reasonable cost, the 802.11 AC Wave 1 is recommended. All right, Wave 2 would provide even more functionality, more bands, but again, is that going to be cost prohibitive? When we're talking about controllers, would you be better served with a cloud-based controller? Because being cloud-based, it can offer more flexibility. All right, because you can manage it off-site, but again, just offers a lot more flexibility there. If you're looking at new cabling, all right, so you need new cabling, whether it's a drop on the wall, if it's something, basically running cabling into the ceiling where you're going to mount an access point. Again, copper needs to be Cat 5e or greater. Anything that you're installing new should be Cat 6a. All right, again, so that you're starting out with current standards. And again, like I said, these are just some points. If you're not a technical person, someone mentioned in my training the other day, we were going over this. I didn't understand a word she said. Okay, so take this back, share it with your IT folks, because like I said, we really are getting into some of the technology weeds. All right, so if you're looking at your switches, is there a 1 gig copper port with a 10 gig fiber expansion? All right, so these are some of the specs that we recommend. Does it support PoE, Power over Ethernet? For your routers, can the ports on that router scale with your WAN bandwidth? So if you increase the bandwidth, will your router support that? Firewalls, all right? Again, can the hardware scale with your internet bandwidth? You want to make sure that you have that flexibility, that if you, because again, working with libraries around the state, I see a lot, needing to increase bandwidth as we see more and more demand. Make sure that that the hardware will support that. When we talk about managed Wi-Fi, right, do you have the staff, the resources to adequately manage the Wi-Fi network on your own? All right, because again, this is a good time to use this service. Now, I do want to caution you. Again, this came up in a discussion yesterday in my workshop. A lot of, or typically, the managed Wi-Fi, we refer to this as a recurring service, where it's on a contract basis. All right, a 3-year contract, could be a 5-year contract. I would be very careful here if you are using your Category 2 funding to enter into a new Wi-Fi, or the MIBS contract, because what happens if Category 2 funding goes away? Like I said, I got this question yesterday. It's, we're looking at awarding a new contract for MIBS, and the company's pushing for a 5-year contract term. Are we still on the hook for the contract if the Category 2 funding, does cease? And yes, you would be. So that's language, you would need to put in your contract. If it's a contract to manage your existing equipment, I would think that would be easier to get out of. All right, because you already own that equipment. You're just paying for, basically the service for the tech to come in, do that management. But if it's a service that includes leased equipment, all right, a lot of times the vendor will spread out the cost of that hardware over a 2-year, 3-year period. So if you're in that type of arrangement and Category 2 does go away after 2019, then that's going to be fully out of your pocket. All right, so I would make sure, put language in the contract. Well, how would you address it if this funding source went away? Now, if the contract does include hardware, as part of that service cost, is there some upgrade path? Some companies will refresh the equipment after 3 years. Some, if you have a 5-year contract, basically, if you go to renew the contract after the 5-year term. Okay, so, but again, it's a good question to ask. Now, access points and controllers, a little more there. So what kind of wireless system do you have now? The hardware, is it cloud-based? Is it controllerless? What kind of license? Some access points do require license, some do not. Some are just included as part of the AP cost. I know Meraki's, they require a subscription, and typically those are purchased in a 3-year, 5-year term. Again, just, what are you using currently? If you're looking at upgrading, what are you looking at moving to? So, currently the AP's controllers, is it meeting your needs? All right, do you want to keep it? Do you want to change it? Do you want to get managed service again? How many access points do I need? Looking at the library's construction. All right, is it an older building? So is that going to affect how many APs that we need? All right. And again, will the existing controller support an update to the next generation of APs? So these are all questions either you take back, have the discussion with, with your tech folks. You might want to sit down, say, with a service provider that you currently utilize, and ask those questions. So how do we start planning for this? Well, basically, you need to start now, all right, with assessing your needs, plan and design your upgrade. And like I said, I would look at kind of a, this 2-prong approach here. Look at an upgrade if you're forced to use all of your Category 2 money 2019, all right, versus if we can do more of a phase-in, as I mentioned. All right, so then in the fall time frame, release the Form 470. And again, we'll be looking at that form. So the Form 470, also if you're going to have a request for proposal. In the winter time frame, because remember when we file a Form 470, the eRate rule is, because this is the competitive bidding piece, it has to be out there a minimum of 28 days. All right, so you need to be prepared after the 28 days to start evaluating the bids. And then in the early spring, then when the Form 471 window opens, all right, after the 28 days, evaluate the bids, choose your service provider, then we file the Form 471. And on the 471, this is where we're indicating specifically, which service provider did we choose, the cost, breakdown of equipment, all of that detail. All right, and then in the spring, summer time frame, we can actually start the upgrade. Now, to talk about installation periods for internal connections, all right, because remember, with internal connections, we refer to this as a non-recurring service. This is where you're purchasing the equipment outright. All right, so eRate rules say that we can start installing the equipment as early as April 1st, 3 months before the start of the funding year. So that way, you know, we're sure that everything's installed, ready to go by the new eRate funding year. Now, pardon me, I want to caution, remember, funding is not guaranteed until USAC issues a funding letter. So, you know, I want to caution you, if this is equipment that you're only going to purchase if you get a funding, you know, positive funding decision, then you obviously have to wait until you get that funding letter. If it's a piece of equipment that maybe your router is beginning to fail, all right, so you've got to replace it regardless, then there's no reason to wait. All right, so again, you can start, like I said, as early as April 1st. And, you know, maybe you ask for a new router, some switches, some access points, you know, a pretty broad range of equipment. You could start installing, say, just the routers April 1st if you choose. You don't have to install everything at the same time. Now, because some folks do wait until they receive their funding letter to start purchasing, then we're also given 3 additional months on the back end of the funding year to purchase and install the equipment. Where the funding year will end for recurring service, all right, so for our bandwidth or internet access, it ends June 30th. We're given until September 30th to actually install, like I said, purchase and install the equipment. This also works really well if you're in a construction project, right? If you're building a new branch location, you know, where basically you could extend this out to get that equipment installed. One other piece to remember, because especially if we're looking at utilizing the Category 2 money in 19, all right, because again, with the uncertainty, what's going to happen, you know, after that, if you're in a construction project, you could go ahead and ask for the equipment for that project, and knowing that maybe it might be sometime after September 30th before you're ready for that. All right, so eRate rules do allow that if for some reason you're delayed in being able to purchase the equipment, something that's outside of the control of the service provider, on that Form 500, you can ask for basically an extension up to a year. So you could actually use your 2019 Category 2 funding and actually go until September 30th of 2021 and still be utilizing the 2019 funds. But like I said, it would have to be, you know, based on something that's outside of the control of the service provider. Let me know if you have questions there. All right, eRate and RFPs, all right, requests for proposals. Few things here. When you're looking at drafting an RFP, remember, eRate does not require an RFP for Category 2 request. You know, however, based on the scope of the work to be performed, there may be some local requirements. We see that if it is a new construction project. If it is a larger, say you're doing a full upgrade, the better job you do of documenting, you know, this is what we're looking for, the better quality of quotes that you're going to receive. Okay, but like I said, it's up to you whether or not to have that that separate RFP document. The Form 470 acts as an RFP on its own. All right. Now, also, it's when we sit down to file a Form 470, there's a table where you have to add, you know, all the various types of equipment that you're looking for with a basically a quantity. How do you know what to add on that 470? Well, eRate does allow for what we call a pre-bid conference to determine your needs. Now, like I said, if you have your IT staff who can, you know, come up with that thorough list, that's great. All right, you know, or have a service provider that you're currently utilizing, have them come in, make that recommendation. Like I said, eRate does allow for that, but then once we file the Form 470, then that company would then have to bid on the job just like any other service provider, and you would evaluate all the quotes, all the bids received. All right, but again, we do we can do those pre-bid walkthroughs, those free pre-bid conferences. Now, when we talk about the RFP, the content, it can be broken down into information to provide and information to request. All right, so information to provide, information about your various library branches, detailed information there, and then, okay, so here's the information that we want back from a vendor. Whether it just be, here's the list of the hardware we want, give us pricing. It could be, this is what we need. We need to upgrade our Wi-Fi, and then you have vendors come in, walk through the buildings to give you a more precise quote there. Okay, now eRate rule, you need to be really careful, and you'll see this again when we look at the 470, that when you're drafting either the 470 or this RFP or RFP documents, you're not allowed to state a preference for a particular service type or component. Meaning that if you've used, say, Ruckus equipment or HP equipment in the past, you can't say, I want HP, I want Ruckus. You can say, I want HP or equivalent, all right? Because remember, this is the bidding piece, so it has to be fair and open. So some things to provide when you're looking at an RFP. Start with your library systems overview. Talk about the number of patrons served. So again, to help the service provider understand basically the level of service. Project summary. What's the purpose? What's the goals, the objectives? What's driving this upgrade? All right, if you're looking at an expansion. Okay, bless you. What's the current environment? All right, what's your network like now? All right, the scope of work, what's the overall service requirements, proposal submission guidelines. All right, so, with the Form 470, as I said, it has to be out there a minimum of 28 days. So when you file that form, it's going to give us a date saying, okay, here's your allowable contract date. All right, it's the 28th day. All right, well, maybe depending on your project, like I said, if it's a larger project, it's new construction, you may need more than 28 days. All right, maybe you're going to say, okay, we want all bids back with, in 45 days. All right, you want to just make sure to state that. If you're going to have vendors basically do a walkthrough, all right, you might want to set aside, maybe 2 or 3 dates. Here's the dates that we'll do the walkthrough. So otherwise, you're not having vendors showing up, taking up a lot of your time. Yeah, you can do that. I would typically suggest maybe 2, maybe even a 3rd date. All right, but yeah, here's the specific date. Here are the times that will allow those walkthroughs. All right, if there are any administrative legal requirements, again, go back and look. Do you have local procurement requirements? A lot of times it depends on the project itself. Like I said, if it's new construction. I would also include a specific response template or matrix for vendors to use. That way it makes it easier. Are you comparing apples to apples? All right. So again, it's going to limit some of the irrelevant information, and a lot of vendors, you'll submit a 470 and you'll get this boilerplate response. It's kind of, this is what my company can do. Here's some sample pricing. That does you no good at all, all right? But a lot of vendors will send that out to you saying, well, I sent a quote, all right, but it didn't address your specific needs. All right, so again, having that template, that matrix will help. So things to request. So service capabilities, all right? So, based on your Wi-Fi needs, all right? So what are the capabilities there? The service proposal, all right? So, specifically what services are being proposed there? If you're looking at installation, all right? So again, exactly what's being proposed, and obviously the cost. Describe any startup requirements, lead time requirements to begin service. So again, if this is something where maybe you're not going to wait for that funding letter, all right, some of the work you want to go ahead and start April 1st, okay, because again, this the program allows for that. You would state that as here as well. Describe invoicing, remittance, reconciliation process. All right, because depending again on the size of the project, if you're asking for equipment for multiple branches, a lot of times it's easier if they show you a breakdown of cost per building, because remember, each each building gets its own budget. All right, so it makes it easier when you say, okay, here's the router, the switch, and the 10 access points for this specific branch. Here's the cost for putting in new cabling drops for that branch. Makes it much easier whenever you're splitting out the cost, filing the 471, where you already have that split out for you. All right, describe any additional professional services. Again, whether that's that installation, if it's training on, say you're putting in a switch and there's training on configuration. All right. Also ask for references. You know, if this is a company you've never dealt with before, all right, it's important, you know, what's their level of experience. All right, so I would ask for those references. Site surveys for Wi-Fi upgrades. Again, this is where you may have the vendors come in, all right, because depending on the hardware that they're recommending, you know, may support a different level, quantity, density, all right, for devices. So again, they may have to come in, do a walkthrough, do a site survey, but address that. You know, like I said, we'll do these on specific dates. So some general milestones to be aware of. Release the RFP. All right. Now, like I said, it could also just be releasing the Form 470. All right, serving the same purpose. Conduct vendor conferences and site visits if necessary. All right, so again, release the RFP, set up for the site visits, allow vendors to submit questions while you wait for their responses. Now, the eRate rule, if a vendor contacts you, you know, to ask specific questions, you know, that you treat everyone fairly, has to be fair and open. All right. On the Form 470, you can state, or you put it in the separate RFP document, that, you know, here's the method for asking questions. Some vendors will insist on, you know, scheduling a time to talk to give you more information about their company. If you do that for one vendor, you have to do it for all that request. All right. So, you know, if you get those type responses, you might want to, or, you know, or those requests, you might want to respond with, you know, please send me all questions in an email, and then you address those. All right. And of course, vendors submit their responses by a set deadline. If you have that RFP document and you say, you know, all bids must be received by this date, when vendors contact you a day or two later, all right, sorry, it's already closed. All right. If you're just filing the Form 470, you can do the same thing there as well. 470 has to be out there minimum 28 days. It's your call if, you know, do you accept quotes after that? If you're evaluating quotes or bids on the 29th day, you're already doing that evaluation. If you have a vendor that contacts you on the 29th, the 30th, saying we want to respond, you can say, we've already closed, we're past our 28 days. You're not required to give them that opportunity. All right. And then, of course, give ample time to review, conduct follow-up. All right. Because you might get a quote from vendors that maybe it's not quite clear. All right. So that would give you time to do that follow-up. Now, when you're going back, you draft the RFP, you know, review it before releasing, obviously. Is it clear what the RFP is asking for? Does it comply with eRate local bidding rules? Because as I said, you know, with eRate, you cannot state that you want a specific manufacturer without following up with the or equivalent. All right, that's one of the biggies that tend to ding a lot of folks. Are the goals of the project clear? Are the roles clearly defined? All right, and then clear what the next steps are in the procurement process. Again, just some things to think about there. Now, when we talk about an RFP, I mean, it could be a very detailed, 30-page document with a lot of, legal information, all the legalese. It could be something as simple as a spreadsheet. This is one that I did assisting a library system where we knew already, because again, we had a vendor do a walkthrough, that here's the breakdown of hardware that we're looking at per location. All right. When we file the 470, there is a place where we can upload documents. Any document we upload in the 470, it's referred to as an RFP. But like I said, it could be something as simple as a spreadsheet saying, here is the type of equipment we're looking for and the quantity. All right, again, something as simple as that. Now, this is a site that a lot of the schools use, but the resources there would still be of value. It's Education Superhighway. And when you go to the site, they do have some RFP guides and templates. Now, most of their guides, it's a lot of information that we've looked at today. Because again, I use their site. They do have some sample RFPs out there, but they're actually RFPs that were submitted by different schools, or maybe a library system. But again, it's a good idea to go back and look at how have others filed, all right, to get ideas and kind of use that as a guide. All right, but this is a good site to use. Bear with me a second here. Let me go here. See if we can pull it up here quickly. All right, so this is what the site looks like. And like I said, it's something that the schools use, but again, it's still appropriate. So if I come here, you'll see where it says guides and templates, get started. All right, so they have guidance if you're looking at a category 1, all right, versus as we come down, category 2. All right, so when we click on, if we look at the RFP under firewall and switches, all right, it's just a sample of an actual RFP that a school district in California submitted. All right, but again, that might be of help. All right, some additional information, and again, a lot of this is information I've already shared in the slides, reaching out to potential vendors, requesting. Something else that you might want to do is called a request for information, similar to having those vendors do or have a company come in as a pre-bid. All right, when you do a request for information, there's no need to file any eRate forms for that. eRate does not frown upon doing a request for information, all right, because again, it gives you that guidance. How do you know what to put on the form? All right, but again, this is just a good site you might want to use. One of the things I do, and maybe it's considered cheating, but you can actually go out and search for other posted Form 470s on USAC's website. And again, I've used this, be it category 1, fiber implementation, but you can go out, you can search. I would look at 2018, a previous, or the funding year we're currently in, but previous filing season. You can search, it allows you to look for 1 month at a time. You can choose, are you looking for a submission from an independent, single library versus a library system? The service type, show me all 470s filed requesting internal connections. Then you can choose the state. I tend to look at other libraries in Ohio. Have your neighbors filed something? I look at other states, New York, California, Texas, where I know there's a lot more libraries filing for eRate, all right, compared to, say, a small state. But again, this is a good way to go out and look at, how are they filing their 470s, and you'll see if they've uploaded an RFP document. So let me show you what this looks like. All right, so if we go to the USAC website, all right, and we're going to go back to tools. All right, remember this is where we click to get to the Cat 2 budget. So when I scroll down, we're going to see a section for the Form 470 tools, view an FCC Form 470, 2016 or later. So these are forms that have been filed within EPIC. All right, now, as I said, you can choose the funding year. We're very early in the filing season for, getting ready for the upcoming 19. So you may not find a whole lot out there. So that's why I would suggest look at 2018. Now, when you do that, you choose your posting date, all right, 1 month at a time. I would go out most folks file, say into December, January, because for 2018, the deadline to file a 470 was February 20th. All right. So I would start with, look at the month of January. All right. And then you choose what applicant type. You can look at, what state. So we can go down, come down here. Oops, sorry, went too far. All right, so we choose our state. And like I said, you look at other states as well. You can look at, okay, who asked for, you can look at maintenance, internal connections, MIBs, all right? You can look at multiples if you choose. All right, just highlight, all right? And then we come down and we click on search. All right, and then when I scroll down, all right, then it's going to show me, okay, here are all of the libraries in Ohio that filed a 470 for internal connections over the month of, exactly, over the month, isn't that exciting? That's yay. Yeah, we're cheering over, it's, oh yeah, that's mine. So you're out there. All right, so again, I can continue pulling down. Now, so again, it's going to say the applicant name. Again, this is all public information. If I click on the 470 number, it'll actually pull up a copy of that 470. So you can see all of, the table, the line items added on that 470. All right. But if I come over here and I scroll, really important. All right, here's a sample I'm looking for. It's going to allow me to look at any RFP documents, all right, that were uploaded. All right, so you can come here, click on the document, pull it up. All right, well, how did my neighbor, file for this? And like I said, maybe it's cheating, but there's no sense in reinventing the wheel, all right? All right, so like I said, come in, you can look at other states. Now, let's do this. Come back in and I search. All right. Okay, and then again, you can click open any of these documents. All right, I won't bother opening a lot of these, but again, it's something that for me, it's a good eye opener. It's given me some good ideas. I've actually used this before where it's, oh, I like this paragraph from this RFP. I like this section from this document. And it's all public information, okay? All right, questions there? I'll give it a minute. Okay. So that covers everything, talking about eligibility of category 2, looking at an RFP. Now, as you're going through this, this afternoon we'll look at how to file a Form 470, showing you where you can upload those documents. How do you break this out? All right. But please keep in mind, as you're going back, and you're working on these RFPs, at any time, feel free, send me a copy of the document if you want me to look it over beforehand. I'd be glad to do that. I've had folks ask me that, and there's times we catch things that, ooh, this could violate eRate, that you're showing a preference for a specific manufacturer. I've had some folks show a preference for a specific vendor, okay, which is also violating the rules. All right, so again, I'd be glad to to look at that and make suggestions. All right.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much.